On a broad daylight on 28 June 2022, a tailor named Kanhaiya Lal was brutally murdered by two men. After the incident, people started protesting. Things went so out of control that the government had to impose Section 144, which prohibits from large gathering. The internet was even shut for the entire state. Allegedly, the two accused posted a video on Facebook claiming for the responsibility of the crime.
They apparently admit that they beheaded the tailor Kanhaiya Lal.
According to the reports, they murdered the victim because of his Facebook post where he reposted a blasphemous comment made by a BJP member, Vipur Sharma. I narrated this incident because I happened to watch a movie made on this tragedy called Udaipur Files, and I was stunned after seeing the movie. And there was just one thought in my head: how on earth did this movie get the clearance from CBFC? This movie pushed the same narrative, the same propaganda, where this bigoted government wants the 80% of the population to believe that they are in danger, their places of worship are in danger, their community has suffered a lot in the past at the hands of the minorities. And by the way, the reason I was surprised was because this is the same CBFC which refused to give a certificate to a film called Bombay Hamara Shahar. The film nothing but focused on the sufferings of the slum dwellers. This is the same CBFC which refused to give a certificate to a film called From Behind the Barricade, which was based on Sikh riots, saying it contained too much violence. This is the same CBFC which refused to give a certificate to a film called Kama Sutra, saying it was based on homosexuality and it is against the morality. This is the same CBFC which demanded almost 127 unnecessary cuts from a recent film called Punjab 95.
Cuts as big as 127 as a number. My first reaction was, what is left in the film? When you ask a filmmaker to make 127 cuts, what is left?
Of course, only trailer will be left.
Yeah.
I don't see there is any relevance of the film will be left. And I don't agree to those 127 cuts. I'm not going to make all those cuts. That is for sure.
They literally asked the makers to remove the word Punjab from the film, which would kill the meaning to the film itself. And the list goes on and on. But I'm not here to talk about the Udaipur incident or the movie made on the incident. But I'm here to talk about the politics, or rather, the dirty politics of censorship. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a legal eye on this issue. Well, before we dive into the history, the politics, or even the question that do we even need censorship, we need to understand something very basic. That where do these directors, these producers derive their rights to produce a movie? It's from Article 19 of the Constitution. Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A says that every citizen of India has the right to freedom of speech and expression. Meaning, if it's Bharat's opinion or his narrative, by the way, who's the director of their profiles, to portray Muslims in a negative way while completely ignoring the larger reality of the community, or his opinion or his thought to play a very creepy and sinister sound whenever a man with a beard and a cap appears, then it's still his opinion, his thought, his imagination, and he has all the freedom to express it. And it's my opinion, my thought to criticize that, and I also have all the freedom to express it. But there's a catch to it. This freedom is not absolute, meaning there are restrictions to it. Under Article 19 Clause 2, there are what we call the reasonable restrictions. Keep a note on the word reasonable, we'll come to it later. And these restrictions can be on the grounds of sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, contempt of court, friendly relations with foreign state, morality, public order, etc. etc. So till here we have understood that every citizen of India has freedom of speech and expression. But this freedom also comes with some restrictions, or I may call reasonable restrictions. And now coming to a more relevant point for this video. So there are different means and platforms as to how a person can express his opinion, his narrative, or in short, his freedom of speech and expression. For example, Bharat expressed it through a film called Udaipur Files, on a platform called theater. I am expressing it through this particular video on a platform called YouTube. And every different platform is regulated by different rules. For example, YouTube is regulated by Information and Technology Act or IT Act of 2000. There's something called as OTT platforms as well, which are again regulated by IT Act of 2000 or very specifically IT Rules of 2021. And just like that, cinema is regulated by an act called Cinematograph Act of 1952. And this act empowers the government to constitute something called as a censor board. And this censor board is responsible to review and censor movies and decide if they fit in within the reasonable restrictions. They can either approve it for unrestricted public exhibition U or approve it with parental guidance for kids under 12 UA or give it an adult only rating A or restrict it only to a specific profession or a group S. The board can also order edits, cuts, or even reject a film completely. So, in short, censorship is a form of restrictions onto movies. And now, coming to a very important question, that do we even need censorship? So, see, censorship has always been a contentious issue throughout the history. We have always had back and forth on this issue. But that one thing we cannot deny is that we do need censorship. Even Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the father of a constitution, supported this. Not exactly censorship, but the idea that parliament should have the power to place limits onto the citizens' fundamental rights. Even the Supreme Court, one of its judgment about Tamil movie, said that police censorship is not only permissible, but it's sometimes necessary. See, another very important reason as to why we need censorship is because of the huge impact what films have on people's mind, emotions, psyche, and sometimes behavior. That's why you sometimes see people getting very emotional after seeing a movie, or people, looking very hopeless after seeing a movie, and sometimes just acting very stupid after seeing a movie. So have you ever wondered as to why do certain films influence people so much? Many might say it's because of the story. Actually, no, it's not because of the story. It's because of its visuals, its realistic looking characters, its lighting, its sound effects, its music, etc. etc. So all of this together creates an influence which is far stronger than words just on paper. And that's why there's a huge difference between reading a particular story and seeing and hearing the same story unfold in front of you. This was also observed by Supreme Court in 1970 in one of the landmark judgment called K. Abbas versus Union of India. The court said that films are a powerful medium which can deeply influence people's mind, which is why some regulations are justified. But you know what? The contention of the debate, which I mentioned earlier, is not around the question that do we need censorship or not. It's more about to what extent the government can censor something and to what extent the government can restrict a person's freedom of speech and expression. And that's why we don't call them restrictions, we call them reasonable restrictions. And that's the reason I was also very particular about the word reasonable. Because the government cannot impose restrictions which are unreasonable or arbitrary, the government should impose the restrictions which make sense, and more than that, they should have a strong reasoning behind it. So up until now, it all sounds fair, right? The constitution has given the government the power to restrict speech in certain areas. The government acting responsibly creates a moral watchdog, a censor board, to make sure the content we see is clean, safe, and ethical. But it's not that simple, obviously. The moment you scratch the surface, you realize that censorship isn't just about protecting the society from unethical content, but it's more about power, control, and politics. And that brings me to the main subject of this video, politics in censorship. Actually, the concept of censorship was first introduced by Britishers in India. And that's not surprising because the first thing every autocratic Oops, sorry. The first thing every autocratic or colonial government does is to control the media and the cinema. They try their best to control over it because it's very easy to brainwash.
और फिर क्या तो मोदी को चाहिए 15,000 का आटा होगा ना हम तो भी ले लेंगे 2,000 का आटा होगा हम तब भी ले लेंगे अमेरिका क्या कहता था क्या हो तुम आज हम कहते तू क्या है बे
It's very easy to influence people if you have the control over what they see and what they hear. For Britishers and any other government for that matter, censorship was never about protecting morality or public order. It was more about silencing criticism, hiding corruptions, covering up crimes, and whatnot. They fear people getting aware about all of this. They fear people uniting against them. And what they do instead is they keep people divided, distracted, and hostile towards each other. And that way, no one questions the real issues. So, during the British's time, cinema was the forefront in educating people with the concepts like freedom, justice, independence, liberty, rights. And not like these concepts are very alien to them. They were aware about all of this. But then, as I've told you before, that when people see and hear something, they get more influence than just reading through an article or listening to the radio. And obviously, the Britishers did not like it. They're very insecure about it. More than anything, they were more insecure with the fact that Indians were getting enlightened about all of this concept. So they wanted to control over it. So what they did was, in the year 1918, they passed an act called the Indian Cinematograph Act of 1918. And this act was euphemistically to provide equality for the safety of the audience and prevention of immoral, degrading performances. So this act made pre-censorship compulsory for every single film. And Britishers being Britishers, they took full advantage of it. They restricted every single film which even slightly criticized the government. Some examples being The Birth of Nation, Broken Blossoms, Ten Commandments, Boatman of Volga, and films like Storm Over Asia were banned even before they reached the censor board. And by the way, this was the similar reason given by our Indian leaders as well when they continued the colonial legacy of censorship. The then Minister of Information and Broadcasting, Mr. R.R. Diwakar, said, "It's a dignified effort to model an effective medium for healthy entertainment, national culture, and mass education." And we haven't progressed at all till this date, especially when it comes to censorship. And I also don't want you guys to mistake this as something to do with political ideology or political parties or certain leaders. You know, like the far right wants to control it, the leftist wants to give more freedom to the people. No, it has nothing to do with any political party, any political ideology, or any political leader. It has everything to do with money, power, and politics. Let me explain you this with some examples. There was a film called Jung or Aman, which was refused certification under the chairmanship of Vijay Anand, who was considered a liberal person, and another film called Akrosh, which was refused certification under the chairmanship of Arvind Trivedi, who was a self-confessed social conservative, basically as a conservative person, and another film called Final Solution, which was refused certification under the chairmanship of Anupam Kher, who was again a liberal person. All the three films were denied certification, and unlike these films propagated hate against anyone or anything, these films were either about social evils or tragedies or just exposing government failures. So, three different films, three different people with different ideologies, and the same result. Let me give you another example. We all are aware about the catastrophe on people's freedom during the emergency under the leadership of Miss Indira Gandhi, and later the Janata Party, which reigned into power on the promise of giving back the freedom to its people, fortunately or unfortunately followed Mrs. Gandhi's footsteps, especially on the issue of censorship. And yes, I do agree that there is a lot in order to overcome the atrocities of emergency. But when it came to censorship, it remained unchanged. Let me explain you how. There was a movie called Prisoners of Conscience, directed by the legendary Anand Patwardhan. This movie was produced during the emergency, and this movie revolved around the atrocities of emergency. And for obvious reasons, it was denied certification. And to keep the movie safe, Patwardhan had exported the movie abroad. And when the emergency was lifted, Patwardhan tried to get a certification during the Janata Party government. But for his surprise, he was still denied certification. Apparently because the movie contained references of the Janata Party as well. Frustrated and perhaps even angry, Patwardhan added an apology to the film saying, although the emergency has ended and many prisoners were released, political prisoners existed before it and they continue to exist even after it was formally over. So, as I said before, it's not about so called dictatorship or democracy or so called leftist or rightist. It is indeed all about politics and power. And now, coming to a more relevant point. See, politics in film censorship works two ways. One where they censor films which have little to no fault in them, just because they expose the government's shortcomings or simply because they don't align with the party's ideology. Films like Fire, Kama Sutra, Urta Punjab, Punjab 95, and the list goes on. And the second way is by not censoring films or blatantly promoting them, which should be scrutinized. Recently, we have seen several propagandist films like the Kerala Story, the Kashmir Files, being referenced in speeches and even made tax free in some states. And now, moving forward, I believe the major problem lies here in how the members are appointed. The board members, including the chairperson, is appointed by the government. And if they want to stay on the board, they have to obey what the government says. And because of that, the members have little to no autonomy while taking the decision. And obviously, the government tends to pick people who match their ideology or go along with their agenda. If you don't believe me on this point, hear it from Uday Shankar Pani, who has been on the examining committee for almost 8 years. He said, political parties want people on the censor board who believe in their line of thought. Let me give you an example for this. The current chairperson Prasoon Joshi is the same person who wrote the Sangan anthem for the 2014 BJP's Lok Sabha elections, and he has also played a major role in some of our beloved Modi ji's campaign taglines. The famous one being "Ab ki baar Modi Sarkar, अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं." So yeah, they tend to choose people who match their ideology. Guys, there is oceans and oceans to talk about this topic. But obviously I can't cover everything in this one particular video. So I've decided to make a series through shorts to cover the rest. So do subscribe to our channel to stay updated.